Hello guys, welcome back with another video. I'm Colleen, a non-diet dietitian who dispels the myths and truths about nutrition. Today we're going to chat about kind of a touchy subject for some, but for me the subject is really personal, and that topic is food and sugar addiction. I dove into the research and I'm going to explain what actually goes on and if things like sugar addiction are actually real or if it's made up. Now, I said this is a really personal topic for me because I've gone through what felt like actually being addicted to food and being addicted to binge eating specifically. So really, this topic does hit very home for me, and all of the feelings of being addicted to food are valid and real. There honestly was a time in my life where I couldn't go without binge eating multiple times a day. And when I say binge eating, I'm not talking about having an extra bowl of Fruit Loops. I'm talking about an entire box plus a few boxes of Little Debbie's and a carton or a tub of ice cream. But I did compensate for eating those, and it was all very hush-hush and secretive, like most addictions are. I did get help for this and overcome it, and have really developed my own process for finding food freedom that feels good, both mentally and physically. Finding that balance, guys, quote-unquote balance, it is possible. And honestly, that is what I teach inside of the society, and well, here we are today. But bottom line, guys, I get it. I get your feelings and they are valid, but there is more to it, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. This video is, as always, for informational purposes only. It is not meant to serve as nutrition or medical advice. If you do need medical advice for anything related in this video, any of the information we cover, please reach out to your medical provider to talk one-on-one immediately. This video is provided as is with no representations or warranties expressed or implied. Okay, before we dive into it, I have got to set you guys down. Whew, all right, so let's talk about what food obsession is. Sometimes it's hard to know what is quote unquote normal when it comes to thinking about food. I mean, we need it, right? So we kind of need to think about it. I mean, that makes sense. True, but there is also a line that can be crossed from general just thinking about food because our bodies need it, and that's a way for our bodies to tell us, hey, we need fuel, and then becoming straight up obsessed with food. Here are a few quick signs that you might be struggling or that you're on your way towards struggling with food obsession. Not being able to fully concentrate on other tasks between meals because you are sitting there planning the next time that you're going to eat. Becoming stressed or anxious or angry if your planned meal or snack changes. Constantly tallying things like calories, points, macros, amounts of fruits and veggies, so many different things like that. Avoiding social situations that may involve food in order to stay in control of your food choices. Food obsession and preoccupation with food can start really early in life. Pressure to diet can come from our parents, and that can lead to serious problems down the line when we have our children focus on things like weight rather than health behaviors. Instagram usage, which starts so young now, has actually been shown to increase one's likelihood of disordered eating patterns. What we know is that when we restrict food, we can very easily develop a preoccupation with food. Whether it's a diet or just not eating breakfast because we didn't have enough time, all we can think about is food. One important thing to note here is that when we talk restriction, we're talking about like actual physical restriction of not allowing yourself to eat a food in amounts or types, but also psychological restrictions. So things like setting limits or even just deeming a food as bad or unhealthy, that too can make us desire those foods more and then eat more of them when we do allow ourselves to have them. One study showed that dieters, those who deemed a milkshake as bad or say that they can only have so much, actually drank more of a milkshake versus non-dieters in the same setting. It's just like honestly telling a kid not to press a big red button. All they're going to want to do is press the big red button, right? And all they'll think about is pressing that big red button. We instantly turn into 5-year-olds. Food obsession can come in varying degrees as well. However, many times it does start off pretty innocently, like just tracking macros or awareness to achieve a goal, and it kind of spirals out of control into food obsession. And that's what happened with me. While there are many who struggle with clinically diagnosed disorders, a lot of the population falls into this kind of other category and might not fit a diagnosis based on things like their weight or frequency of certain behaviors. This could be when you become obsessed with things like points, macros, ingredient lists, etc. Even if you allow yourself to break those rules around those things, you still may experience anxiety over it or feel guilty. One study found that 75% of women in the US struggle with some disordered behaviors. A few years ago, a tool called the Yale Food Addiction Scale was designed to evaluate addictive-like behaviors that translates its criteria for substance dependence to calorie-dense foods. A later study has since identified that as this tool identifies those with a food addiction as likely to have certain disorders, and that terming individuals as being addicted to food may hinder their care when they need to be treated. A group of researchers coined that using food addiction as a term is actually misleading. Now, this commentary states that more research is definitely needed to fully understand the phenomena that is happening at the neurobiological level to better inform recommendations for patient care. Food comes in variety and does not have a single pharmacological action like those that are found in drugs. Using the term food addiction is a lot of times misleading when the psychological response is not the same, and it could have repercussions in patient care without proper understanding. The American Society of Addiction Medicine actually defines addiction as a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, and memory, and the related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. Now, this is reflected in individuals pathologically pursuing reward and/or relief by substance use and other behaviors. Addiction is characterized by inability to consistently abstain, impairment in behavior control, cravings, diminished recognition of significant problems with one's behaviors and interpersonal relationships, and a dysfunctional emotional response. Like other chronic diseases, addiction often involves cycles of relapse and remission. Without treatment or engagement in recovery activities, addiction is progressive and it can result in disability or premature death. Now, here's the deal. We know that food can give us the same reward stimuli as social stimuli, such as positive expressions from friends, our own social reputation, and maternal and romantic love through dopamine. Who doesn't want to feel good? We also know that the more that we restrict foods, actually the stronger our brain response of reward, attention, and motivation is to those foods, which can make us more susceptible to those binge-like style behaviors when compared to those who are eating enough and not restricting foods. A study in 2005 that used rats got a lot of media attention. Now, this study claimed to link sugar and addiction, but what they glazed over was that in order to induce this addiction, they had to restrict one group of the rats to only have access to the sugar for 12 hours a day and essentially develop a dependency on it. Now, as scientists, yes, I'm a registered dietitian and a scientist, we call this glazing over, a confounding factor. Essentially, it's something outside of the controlled parameters of the study. So I'd argue that they weren't creating dependency, but rather a restrictive environment, causing the rats to overeat because they didn't know when their next meal or that type of food would come. They had that restriction. Additionally, also animal models can only give us hints into human metabolism, though they can't give us defined answers on how humans will respond to stimulus. Like I said, they can only give us kind of a peek into it. They're important to inform our recommendations in research, though they can't be the sole recommendation for why a scientific phenomena is happening in humans. A meta-analysis where they review and analyze all the data on a given topic, this is the strongest and kind of gold standard for recommendations based on science, shared that there is little evidence to support that sugar itself is addictive. They came to the conclusion, based on the confounding factor that we discussed earlier, the science only suggests addictive behaviors when the access to the sugar is not consistent. A later cross-sectional study among college students found that one's unique perception of the reward value of food was a predictor of whether or not they would consume that food in excess. Does this sound familiar? Like food rules, perhaps? We work on breaking food rules in the society and to end that seemingly endless restrict binge cycle. Food addiction is less of an addiction to food itself than it is a biological response to food scarcity, i.e. dieting and food rules. We get this positive response because we want to be fueled. That's why we feel good when we eat. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back full circle here to my own experience. When I would binge, it was really comforting to me. I felt almost honestly like I had a high. I was essentially checking out of reality and getting this rush of feeling good, which honestly didn't last long, but it wasn't actually the food that I wanted or that I was addicted to. It was the process. It was the feeling, the weight that I was putting on the food to solve my problems. It was the feeling of having an escape. That is what I was addicted to, I believe. Does that make sense? So how do you stop being obsessed with food? So by now you probably have an idea if your thoughts of food are normal or if they're crossing over into the food obsession territory. If you are crossing that threshold, what do you do, right? So here are a few tips. These are honestly the exact steps that I teach inside of the society. Tip number 1 is to stop restricting overall amounts of food. So in order to stop food obsession, your body really needs to get to a place where it has adequate energy. Thinking of food is actually a hunger cue. So if you find yourself constantly thinking about it, then you actually might need more of it. Tip number 2 is to stop viewing foods as good or bad. Stop putting them in those categories. Firstly, food, it does not have moral value. When you say a food is quote unquote bad or it's unhealthy, you're likely going to wind up wanting it more and likely in larger quantities. Remember that milkshake study that I referenced earlier? Also, this is a process. I mean, our food rules, what we feel is good and what we feel is bad, what we feel is allowed, what we feel is off limits, those didn't just pop up overnight, right? So it's honestly unrealistic for us to expect them to just vanish that quickly. I have an entire blog post that goes over how to identify and how to go about breaking those food rules. And yes, deeming food good or bad is a food rule. Doing this is going to help you overcome your fear of those bad foods and to see food more neutrally. I also recommend picking some mantras and affirmations to remind yourself that food is neutral. And some of my favorites are, I deserve to eat all foods, guilt is not an ingredient, so I won't add it. I also have a blog post that has tons of different examples and we use these all the time in the society. I will link to them again in the description for you. Okay, tip number 3 is to make peace with your body. One of the big reasons that food rules develop is because we want to manipulate our body, our size, our shape, our weight, whatever it is. Now, I truly believe that in order to make peace with food, you also have to make peace with your body, what you're putting that food into. And this is so important, and we have an entire stage dedicated in the society to this. And I also have a blog post for you on how to overcome negative body image that has tons of tips in it. Again, I'm gonna put tons of resources in the description of this video for you guys. And if you're like, Colleen, okay, so that's all great, but I also want to be healthy, I got you. Here's the deal. Weight and body size are not great indicators of our actual health. I want you to be healthy, okay? I am a registered dietitian. That's kind of my job, right? You truly can be healthy at any size. Check out my blog post on health at every size, or HAZE, which again, I'm gonna link for you in the description, but that really kind of walks through a lot of that. I also have a couple of videos that I'll link. It's kind of like we all have different shoe sizes, right? And we wouldn't try to make a Chihuahua look like a German Shepherd, would we? We all have unique body sizes and shapes. I teach how to implement gentle nutrition and to honor your health and make peace with food. You can find a balance. I have tons more resources on gentle nutrition. You can also see me really show you how to implement in a lot of my full day of eating videos. All right, guys, I truly do believe that food rules, eating clean, weight loss itself shouldn't be the main goal of your wellness journey. And a lot of times starting there can turn it into those feelings of addiction. We know that health promoting behaviors such as eating servings of fruit and veggies every day, getting regular exercise, consuming alcohol in moderation, and not smoking are better predictors of health than just weight alone. And when we continually obsess over food and yo-yo dieting, we may actually be placing our bodies at more of a risk for chronic disease, high blood pressure, lessening bone density, and something called REDS. There is growing research to support a set point weight, and I have a video on this. It's one of my most popular ones. I can link to it up there in the description for you, but basically a weight that our bodies want to be, that they function optimally at. Weight is not just a food and exercise equation that our society, the diet, wellness, fitness industries want us to believe that it is, and it's not totally in our complete control by implementing food rules. Now, I know this was a big topic that we discussed today, and it's honestly not as straightforward as it seems, but I hope that this video was helpful to explain why we might feel this way and to give you some tips to help overcome it. It is 180% possible. I can tell you that it's hard work. I won't lie, but it is possible. Guys, if you like this video and you thought it was helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe to the channel, and also click the little bell to be notified that every time a new video is uploaded, which is every single week. And with that, I'm going to see you guys later.